Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and I do confirm we have quorum with all committee members present, with the exception of Councillor Baum, who did send his regrets this evening. Mr. Chair, I'm just going to run through the list of staff that are going to be with us tonight. So with us, we have Muhammad Hassan, Manager, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. John Bolognone, City Clerk. Neil Carbone, Commissioner, Corporate Services. Desiree Kennedy, CFO and City Treasurer. Casey Keys, Administrator, Rideau Crest Home. Janet James, Deputy City Clerk. Blair Johnson, Corporate Records and Information Officer. Jeff Walker, Manager, Taxation and Revenue. Elizabeth Fawcett is our host this evening, and myself, Julie McCarty-Jansman, Committee Clerk. And we have no members of the public registered for this evening. So Mr. Chair, I'll turn it to you to call the meeting to order.
Thank you. And I officially call the meeting to order. And as the first step on the agenda, it's the approval of the agenda. With the consent of the committee, can we move the briefing to just before the actual business item? So moving the briefing to after 7B and before 7C, unless there's any opposition. Does anyone have an opposition to that? Seeing none, can I have a motion just to make that simpler? Thank you, Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Osterhoff. All in favor? Thank you. And now an approval of the amended agenda. All those in favor? Or sorry, a mover and a seconder. Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Doherty. All those in favor? Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting of December 9th, 2021. Can I have a mover? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Chappelle, all those in favor? Thank you. Passed unanimously. Is there a disclosure of pecuniary interest by anyone? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one. No delegations, so we'll move to business item A, the Rideau Crest Home Board of Management. And the motion is that the Administrative Policies Committee resolve itself into the Board of Management for Rideau Crest Homes. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Holland, Councillor Osterhoff, all in favor? Thank you, all unanimous. We are now directors charged to advance the interests of this organization, protect it, and give oversight. Ms. Keys, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the first report that is provided to the Rideau Crest Board of Management for 2022 and provides information for November 2021 through till mid-February of this year. Rideau Crest Home has maintained an overall occupancy rate of 88.82% in 2021 and a rate of 93.92% up to mid-February of this year. The home continues to have 6 empty beds on the 4th floor to cohort ill residents in the event the home is required to declare a COVID-19 outbreak. The home has also been successful in being approved for 2 beds to be held in advance for 2022 as we continue work to renovate all the resident washrooms. As of February 14th, there were 451 people on the wait list for the home, 52 of which are in crisis. Rideau Crest Home had 10 incidents reportable to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care for this reporting period with no complaints. 2 reportable incidents noted for the declaration of a COVID-19 outbreaks on December 30th and January 5th. The December 30th outbreak was due to 1 resident and 1 associated staff member on the same terrace testing positive. The outbreak was declared by KFLNA Public Health Unit. The resident was relocated to the dedicated COVID-19 wing and remained asymptomatic for the duration of the isolation period. January 5th outbreak was due to 2 positive staff members working within the same home area during their incubation period. Rideau Crest continues to see positive cases amongst staff with no further resident impact. However, with updated guidance from the province and public health regarding outbreak declaration, there has been no effect to the home. To date, 99% of residents at Rideau Crest Home have obtained the 4th dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. As well, to date, 94% of staff have obtained their 3rd dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. The province made a number of announcements yesterday regarding ease of restrictions and removal of directives, many of which are effective March 14th. Rideau Crest is reviewing these now and will make updates to policy and ensure communication is given as needed. The approved 2021 operational budget for Rideau Crest Home is just over $6 million in municipal contribution. As of the end of December, Reader Crest Homes spent 91.24% of this contribution, which is $526,000 underspent. The vast majority of this underspend was related to staffing and the difficulties the home had to staff at full complement due to the pandemic screening and isolation requirements from last year. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there is any.
Thank you, Ms. Keys. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Hall or Director Holland?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to hear that things seem to be very stable with staffing. Am I correct that the current and ongoing outbreaks have not had any significant impact on staffing levels?
Thank you, and through you. We do continue to see staff that are testing positive as the community continues to see lots of positive cases at this time. So those staff are unfortunately out of the home for a 10-day period once they are either positive through a test and or have a household contact or a close contact. They also then have to remain out for 10 days. So it impacts that individual. We're just not seeing that transition into close contacts in the home because of PPE requirements. As well, we're also not seeing that transition over to residents.
Great. And then, yeah, just one other question, sort of related to that, but it's more of an update on the provincial approaching the provincial regulation, approaching 4 hours per day. I know that it's been happening gradually, and just curious if there has been any impact of the pandemic, or if you have any update on how close we're getting to that locally.
So I can say for Rideau Crest, we've started seeing the flow of that funding as of October of last year, and we were successful in hiring 2 additional full-time RPNs with the part-time backfill for them, as well as 8 additional full-time PSWs, and we're continuing to work on the part-time backfills for those. We're still very luckily not having much difficulty in recruitment for PSWs at this time. Registered staff locally and even provincially is becoming even more increasingly difficult through the pandemic. And then as we're starting to come out of that pandemic, we're really not seeing much change in terms of more registered staff applying for these positions. So the province has reacted. They are starting to put some things in place that will help homes in recruiting registered staff at this time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Director Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. It's just, so this is a new file for me. I'm in the learning process here. On page 7, and I'm interested in the waiting list and what the process is to get people off the waiting list. Because I noticed, like on page 7, it says there are 303 4A priorities. Like, what's a 4A priority?
Thank you, and through you. Our wait lists have seemingly been increasing over the last number of years, and 4A priority are actively looking for long-term care. The crisis are seeking long-term care from either hospital admission or home crisis, so they just simply don't have the supports at home that they need to be sustained in the community. The remaining individuals that would be on the wait list have placed themselves on the wait list in hopes to get into long-term care in the near future. And when I say near future, I mean in the next 6 months to 2 years, because often that's what it can take to get into long-term care.
Right. So what happens if they're with the 52 that are in the hospital and waiting to go somewhere? Where are they in the meantime?
Some remain in hospital and some are remaining at home. A majority of those are waiting at home and simply don't have the supports. They're requiring community supports at this time, but we know that's often very difficult to continue to have the community supports available. Often many of those individuals are being supported by family members, and family members are simply being burnt out and or aren't able to continue to provide the support that's needed for those individuals.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Will there be anybody else from committee, from the board of directors, that would like to ask a question? Seeing none, this is a recommendation that the Administrative Policies, that the Administrative Policies Committee arise. Sorry, that's a report from information only. Madam Clerk, do we need a motion or anything like that?
Mr. Chair, through you, we just need a mover and a seconder to resolve from the rise from the Board of Management, sorry.
Great, so let's rise from the Board of Management. Councillor Osterhoff, Councillor Chappell, welcome back, councillors. Moving on to B, use of corporate resources for election policy purposes. Does staff wish to say anything about this? No? All right. Does any councillor have any questions about this report? Councillor Chappell. You're still muted, Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have trouble with being on mute. I think it's a conspiracy amongst my colleagues to make sure that I don't say anything. My question is really for the staff on this particular agenda item with regards to the use of municipal computers and phones and things leading up to the municipal election. Is there anything in this particular update that is different from the similar report that would have come prior to the last municipal election in 2018? And if there is differences, what are they? I wasn't able to find out.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Really, this is a housekeeping report. Every 4 years, we're required to take a look at the policies that we have in place. So there's 4 or 5 points here dealing with the recommended changes in there. We're updating the definition of the nomination day to be consistent with the definition in the Municipal Elections Act, I should say. We're deleting some redundancy and unnecessary sections. We're including volunteers and students in the definition of city employees. We're including video conferencing services licensed by the city, such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams as corporate resources. We're also including the city's social media platform within the policy. And we're also doing some housekeeping dealing with the roles and responsibilities. It truly is a housekeeping report.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I appreciate it.
Is there any other councillor who would like to speak? All right, seeing none, then I guess we will put this on the floor. The recommendation that the Administrative Policies Committee to recommend to Council that the use of corporate resources for election purposes policy attached as Exhibit A to report AP 22-009 be approved. May I have a mover? Councillor Chappell, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to a briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. We're here today to present the report dealing with the board and committee nominations process, as well as EDI. I'd like to introduce Blair Johnson. He's our Corporate Records and Information Officer, and he works with me in the City Clerk's Department. He's one of the staff who assisted us in preparing, gathering data in the drafting of this report that you see before you today. There are a number of additional staff in attendance to support the team, and we're prepared to answer any questions, but I'll ask Blair to provide a brief presentation which outlines our findings and recommendations.
Thank you, John. Elizabeth, do you mind? Thank you very much. Actually, could you go to the second slide, please? Thank you. So in December 2020, 2 motions were passed by Council that prompted the reviews that were detailed in this report. The first motion directed staff to prepare a SWOT analysis of the current nominations process for filling citizen appointments to boards and committees, and to research the municipal best practices in this area. The second motion directed staff to review the framework from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities entitled Run, Win, and Lead Toward Parity in Municipal Politics, a municipal sector framework for achieving gender parity in local government, and provide Council with recommendations for increasing the rates of underrepresented people on boards and committees and in the municipal candidate process for the 2022 election. Next slide, please. With regards to the first motion, staff conducted an online survey which received 84 responses. The survey was focused on receiving public feedback on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the current nominations process for citizen appointments to boards and committees. In the survey, most respondents indicated that they understood the application process, the requirements to serve on committees, and the mandates of the committees. Most respondents also indicated that they found the application form easy to follow. Neutral responses were generally received with regards to the ease of the applications process and receiving responses from staff in a timely manner. The majority of respondents indicated that they would prefer to learn about the recruitment process through the city's website and social media. Next slide, please. In addition to the responses summarized on the previous slide, survey respondents were given the opportunity to answer an open-ended question. What are your ideas to increase diversity on municipal boards and committees? The responses can be summarized into 3 general themes in descending order of frequency. Number 1, advertisement of volunteer opportunities on boards and committees should be targeted to specific groups and the members of those groups that may be interested in serving on the committee or have the necessary skills set for that board or committee. The city should leverage the existing social infrastructure in the city to help generate candidates. The city should also work to structure meetings such as locations and times around the needs of those individuals and groups. Number 2, offer compensation to volunteers serving on a committee or board. This includes both not monetary compensation as well as providing directly for or providing restitution for transportation and childcare. The city does not currently provide any compensation or restitution to citizen appointees on boards and committees. Number 3, the city should target individuals with lived experience when considering the skill set necessary for a person to serve on a board or committee. Next slide, please. In addition to the survey, staff researched the best practices of 28 municipalities with regards to their processes for recruiting and appointing citizen representatives to boards and committees. In Kingston, 6 council members serve on the Nominations Advisory Committee. The members of this committee meet in a public meeting to discuss and select citizen representatives to serve on boards and committees, making a final recommendation to Kingston City Council, which confirms the appointments. The Nominations Committee votes on a majority rules basis. 16 municipalities were found not to have a process similar to Kingston. Of those with a similar process, the voting process was found to be similar to that used in Kingston. Some other municipalities have their citizen representatives selected by members of council in meetings closed to the public, while others have citizen representatives recommend other citizens for appointment to boards and committees. 7 municipalities surveyed utilized the interview process for those volunteering to serve on a committee or a board. 4 municipalities have a process for interviews, but rarely use them. Next slide, please. The second motion from council is similar to the first one discussed. This motion directed staff to provide council with recommendations on increasing the rates of underrepresented people on municipal committees and boards and incorporating the equity goals from the FCM Municipal Sector Framework for Achieving Gender Parity in Local Government for the 2022 municipal election candidate process. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities document is a guide established to help improve diversity and gender equity for municipalities. Staff reviewed this document through the lens of the city's current processes with regards to the recruitment and nominations process for boards and committees, as well as the information sharing process for those interested in running for municipal council. A main component of this document are the 3 key actions and the recommendations contained within those actions. The 3 key actions are: number 1, mentorship and encouragement, focused on providing formal and informal networking opportunities, peer networking, and creating a pipeline of candidates by providing support for an early age and celebrating successful leaders from underrepresented groups. Number 2, breaking down informal networking and decision-making, which focuses on engaging stakeholders and addressing exclusionary behaviors such as unconscious bias or stereotypes. Number 3, improved access and sharing of tools, which includes addressing information gaps for those interested in running for council, increasing awareness and positive perception of municipal politics, and collecting and sharing of data. Next slide, please. Based on the review of the previously discussed information, staff presented a series of recommendations to the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee and requested feedback. Staff have begun work to reach out to specific community organizations and groups when recruiting for positions on boards and committees, and will continue to expand contacts and connections in this area. Staff will work to enhance advertising of volunteer opportunities on boards and committees through the use of social media, alongside other traditional forms of advertising in a multimedia approach. The EDI committee stated that the city should differentiate between compensation and creating equity/reducing barriers. It was suggested that if the city is interested in increasing equity on boards and committees, then the city should examine the barriers that prevent people from serving their community. Staff will continue to examine forms of monetary and non-monetary compensation and the associate budget implications. Staff are proposing that the mandate of the Nominations Advisory Committee be amended to add 3 public members of the EDI Committee to the Nominations Advisory Committee. Staff are also proposing that 3 separate interview panels be created, each consisting of 2 council members and 1 EDI committee member from the Nominations Advisory Committee. These panels would only be these panels would be supported by city staff and would only be utilized when the Nominations Advisory Committee wished to interview applicants for citizen appointments. Next slide, please. Staff will track and report on the success of diversity initiatives annually through summary data based on the data provided in the voluntary diversity identification forms submitted by applicants. The recommendations contained in the 3 key actions from the Run, Win, and Lead document will be used by staff to assist underrepresented individuals who are interested in serving on boards and committees and Kingston City Council. As part of these initiatives and in preparation for the 2022 municipal election, staff will continue to host candidate information sessions, augmenting in-person sessions with live streaming and virtual options. Finally, staff are recommending the creation of a public appointment policy. Attached to this report is Exhibit C. This policy takes information regarding the appointment process that is contained across multiple documents and bylaws and combines them into one policy, increasing the transparency of the process for the public. And next slide, please, Elizabeth. So that concludes the presentation, and staff are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. May I ask the committee if they have any questions on the presentation? Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the voluntary data on diversity and disclosure, do you have stats for the current makeup of the members of the committees that are currently in process at the moment?
I'm going to defer to the deputy city clerk, but I believe we don't have that data currently.
Okay. You had 84 respondents to a SWOT survey that was online.
Did Ms. James want to respond to that?
I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Councillor Chappelle. I was going to confirm what my colleague, Mr. Johnson, said. We don't have those statistics available, but we could, we could get them.
So we don't have a baseline data of how diverse our communities currently are at this point.
We don't have those analytics at the moment,
no. There are hundreds of people that apply for these positions, certainly over the term of council. And yet we chose to do an online survey rather than reach out to those applicants who were not successful or were successful and applied to these boards. Is there any reason why we wouldn't have reached out to those folks that had provided their information and interest directly and asked them these questions?
I'll answer that question. We reached out to a number of groups, a number of organizations to try to gather that information. You can't get everybody to be able to respond back with what we're doing. We did our best and we'll continue to do better. And our next go-round will ensure that the group is contacted as well.
My question was it contemplated to contact people who had previously applied to these boards and committees?
We contemplated that, but we did not follow through with respect to that action, given the limited timeline to get the report in play.
I just would have thought that that'd be a good pool of candidates to consult with, that's all. And was anyone who is currently on the nominations committee, any members of council currently on or previous members of the nomination committee consulted on this proposal?
The report was out for consultation and we did receive the information, but we're not at this point able to provide names to comments. The way information is provided to us is in a confidential matter, so to speak. So yes, they were, but I can't tell you who they were.
And that wasn't my question. My question was, we have a committee of nominations committee. There was no special meeting called to have this discussion with that committee. because currently as a member who served on that committee, and certainly many of my colleagues here also serve on that committee, there's always been a very strong emphasis on trying to ensure we have diversity of candidates that are selected to serve on these committees. And the group that worked on that committee as members of council are very cognizant of that and made it a significant effort, especially over the last few terms of appointments. And so I just think it's disingenuous from staff not to reach out to the committee responsible for this particular role. And that's my only disagreement with this approach.
Ms. James, you wish to recall or reply?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Chappell, I can confirm that the survey was sent to all actively serving members on committees, including all members of council.
Okay. So consultation taking place. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, so one question about the structure. And so the addition of members of the EDI committee to the nominations advisory committee, I'm just wondering, so like, how will that, will there be, it seems that that's an advisory role, but will there be ongoing discussion at the EDI committee on this report? And will this be, I know that there's, we'll be reporting, staff will be reporting back on progress, but just curious about that relationship and how those two groups will work together.
Mr. Clerk.
That's a great question. Yes, we'll continue to work collaboratively with the EDI committee. The EDI committee at some point will make a recommendation, which will then go through the council with respect to the appointees to the nominations advisory committee. And we'll work with both the nominations advisory committee, including the new members from EDI, to work once again collaboratively towards the same goal, and that's reviewing the applications with an EDI lens. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I had one other tiny little bit of feedback, and I sort of lost it, but I'm going to start and see if it comes back to me, which is that so I think part of what we're trying to get at with getting people involved who haven't been involved in the past is a sort of building an ongoing relationship with people who have done this work, whether it's members of council or previous members of committees. And so I think what's discussed in the report seems really good. The information sessions, etc. But it really is a question then, will there be a process, like an ongoing process to continue to gather this feedback outside of the committee's work?
Mr. Clerk.
Apologies. It happens to the best of us, I guess. That is an excellent question, and short answer, yes. So we'll continue to do collaboration with respect to this activity. And this is just the beginning of a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we'll get there, but it will take time and it will take commitment on its side. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So some of the responses where I don't think I just wonder how they're going to be addressed. Like there was one which I always thought was kind of missing too, and that was that there's no feedback when people are unsuccessful. They never just hear from the city at all. And I just wonder those little details of that we heard during the responses, whether we will be acting on them or.
Thank you for that question, Councilor Doherty. Yes, we will be acting on them. We've already started changing our processes in-house. Communication does flow both ways, so that we can ensure that we get continued applications and proper responses. It is somewhat disingenuous, even given the number of unsuccessful candidates. We'll be changing our processes to ensure that they're communicated to as well.
Great, thanks. And after, and when somebody, while you're here, when somebody is finished or steps down from a board, does the city write a thank you card to them, thanking them for their time?
We actually have a recognition program that we use for long-term service members as well, and we had a special night to recognize those events and those individuals, but even some that are just named for one term, they'll also be provided with some form of recognition, invited to the reception, and they'll come back for further time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Chappelle, second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, why is KEDCO and Tourism Kingston exempt? And why is the Taxi Commission, which has its own provincial statute, included in this process?
Great question. Historically speaking, the decision was made to eliminate those two nonprofit organizations. So they had to do their own recruiting, their own appointments and whatnot. Taxi Commission, its own statute. And what we do is provide a service for the Taxi Commission to assist them in recruiting and the appointment process. And it's just a heritage or a legacy piece. And really what we do here at the city is provide that service to assist the Taxi Commission. But Regional Council it's solely outside of the city's jurisdiction with respect.
Could we put forward an amendment to include Tourism Kingston and KEDCO to this process so that they ensure they have equity? Because we had a big kerfuffle with KEDCO 2 sessions ago.
Thank you for that question. What I can say to that is that the battle was fought, a decision was made, and we're following the council decision with respect to that. If the council is of the opinion that they want to reconsider that process, then there is a reconsiderable process. But right now, in keeping with the bylaw ones of those two organizations, they are independent of the city when it comes to the appointment process.
But they shouldn't be independent of the diversity and inclusion process.
Well, my response to that would be that we will provide that information through to those two organizations and where the city is with respect to EPI, and we're hopeful and we suspect that they'll follow through with respect to that as well.
Those are high hopes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Osterhoff, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did appreciate the report very much as well. I thought it was well done. I was intrigued by, and previously as well, by the component of remuneration. And I was, certainly thought there'd be room for all costs to be for transportation to make it to meetings. And I think that's something that could be managed. But I was also wondering, did the committee consider the fact that we now have proven that technology works so well that it is really going to widen people's ability to connect into meetings and would really make everyone able to participate? And so that would be without, the pandemic has proven that technology has been our friend here, and we've really done amazing things. And so is that something they realize would also be a benefit to something like this endeavor?
Thank you for that question. And yes, we did consider it. There will be further reports on this with respect to how we're going to be dealing with virtual hybrid type meetings in the future at the Citizen Committee and Standing Committee level. So this is all part and parcel of that discussion. Yes.
I know that we had mentioned, Mr. Chair, that young mothers and many different family situations, keep people home, and so because they have responsibilities, and we get that. But certainly, this technology that we've been so successful with as a city will enable the opportunity for participation. So, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Holland, second time.
It's a comment. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Let's bend the rules. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to say, I know that we still have work to do, but this is so much better than where we were years ago. I mean, of course, just thinking back to my earliest term on council, when, you know, everyone had really good intentions and we wanted to see diverse voices involved in every aspect of decision making, but we didn't have the right structure or the right process to make that happen. And of course, I think what we've learned is that part of the challenge there is that we need people to either, first of all, self-identify or also find the information that's needed to get involved in these committees and boards. And so we're getting to the point of being able to do all that, which is a really important step. So I thank everyone involved in this.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. So I was asked to ask two questions on this. The first is with regards to the EDI committee members going to the nominations committee. Could we have the rationale for why we're not choosing new people and why we're using those committee people? And second, do they have an equal vote with councillors?
That's an excellent question, Councillor. So to your second point first, yes, they will have the same power, so to speak, as councillors. The councillor group is 6, the EDI group is 3, and together the nominations committee is 9. Your first question, sir, could you repeat that again?
What is the rationale for including only people already on the EDI committee as opposed to new members from the public?
With respect to that, in the first term, it is going to be new members that are appointed to EDI. It won't be the current group right now because their term expires at the same time as this council term expires. So the people that will be forming the new nominations committee will be new people.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, let's see. Okay, so let's put this on the table. Recommendation that the Administrative Policies Committee recommend to Council that the Public Administration Appointment Policy attached as Exhibit C to report number AP 22-006 be approved, and that bylaw number 2010-205, a bylaw to define the mandate and meeting procedures of committees established by the Corporation of the City of Kingston as amended, be further amended as per Exhibit B to report number AP-22-006, and that the framework developed by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities entitled Run, Win, and Lead towards parity in municipal politics, municipal sector framework for achieving gender parity in local government, be used as a guiding document for staff when undertaking citizen recruitment and nomination activities. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Holland, Councillor Doherty seconding. Is there any discussion on this now? Or further questions? Councillor Chappell.
First, I'd like to congratulate staff for the work they did. I do like the report that FCM had put out, and I think it's great to incorporate that and encourage gender parity on council. It certainly lends itself to civility and good camaraderie. Is there any way to split this out? Because I'm still not comfortable with providing an equal voice for the EDI members on the committee. That is typically the responsibility of council members. So is there any way to split out the motion that, or does it completely cripple it? Or is there any way it could be presented at council that allows it to be split?
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you for that question. Procedurally, you can split the recommendation to separate the group, the council group versus the EDI group. You just take a vote on it and the majority is passed. I would suggest to you that you would be crippling what we're doing with respect to EDI by eliminating this and not giving this an opportunity to succeed.
With due respect, Mr. Clerk, I believe he was asking about a particular aspect of one of the exhibits, not the entire exhibit. Is it possible to present to council an option within one of the exhibits as opposed to the whole exhibit?
The exhibit can be amended. You can amend an exhibit having it as amended by deleting this and that, whatever the committee wants to do. So I go back to what I said before. Yes, it is amendable.
Thank you. So Councillor Chappelle, it sounds like if you have an amendment ready, if not, it might be best to bring it to council. We can amend it there. And that would give you the opportunity to rally support. How would you like to play this?
I just, you know what, I don't have a prepared amendment tonight. It's just the way it's cobbled together. It really makes it, you're put offside because I do want to support the gender parity. I just don't like adding the EDI members to the committee. I would rather have baseline data to support where we are failing to have inclusion in our appointments, but we don't have that baseline data. So we're basically trying to fix a problem that I don't necessarily see. And I was hoping to have more time to maybe adjust or make the recommendation to for the next term of council or the next term of council to do a better job at inclusion and diversity, but not necessarily change the way we do it. When you look at the way the other committees across the province, when those 28 municipalities are incorporated, they don't do this process. So I don't think there was really enough opportunity to have a discourse on this before we deployed it. So unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I don't have an amendment to try to fix it. It's messy. The way it's built, it's very difficult to try to tease it out. So I'm not sure how to approach it. So I'll have to pass at this point, but I do appreciate your consideration and asking the question.
Thank you. Any other questions on this or comments? Seeing none, I will ask a quick one. With regards to page 17 of 23, it talks about recognizing all genders and all backgrounds. I'm just curious, how many genders does the city recognize?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to turn that over to Ms. James or Mr. Austin to respond to that, please.
Ms. James?
Sorry, I got myself unmuted, but I didn't get my camera turned on all that quickly. So excuse me, when the applicant is filling out a committee application, we have male, female, prefer not to answer, so it's up to the applicant whether they choose to disclose that. We've also updated the application to expand on the salutations to include Mr., Mrs., Ms., mix, so that we have gender neutral prefixes or salutation forms of address in our application form. So there's choice there. So you could answer if you feel comfortable. You could choose not to answer. You could identify. You could not identify. Does that help?
Yes, that's exactly. We didn't want to. I was hoping that we weren't forcing somebody to reveal something they may not want to. Is the same true for background? It says that we're going to identify all backgrounds.
Yes, absolutely. So the application is open to the applicant to provide as much or as little detail if they whatever they feel comfortable with. When an applicant to a committee submits their application, they receive a response that confirms that their application has been submitted, and it also provides them with a link to the volunteer diversity information form, which is a confidential form, and they can choose to fill that out if they would like to as well, to provide additional detail that would not be part of a public agenda. So it does give an applicant the opportunity to provide expanded information that maybe they're not comfortable sharing in a public forum. And that information is shared in confidence with the nomination committee to help them with the consideration of their application.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will ask, has any member of the public come in since we were told there was none?
Mr. Chair, through you, we still have no members of the public with us.
Great, so in that case, I shall call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously, thank you. Moving on to D, tax ratios and capping parameters. The staff want to tell us who's capped and who's not?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So the report before you tonight is for the committee to approve and recommend to council both the setting of the property class tax ratios, as well as the parameters for the property tax capping program for the 2022 taxation year. So in terms of the tax ratios are applied to the residential tax rate and used in order to distribute the total tax burden across the various property classes. So for example, the committee will recall in response to the impact of previous reassessments, there was approved policy decisions to reduce the farm class tax ratio and before that, the multi-residential ratio. But because we are not going to be subject to a provincial reassessment in 2022, staff are recommending that the tax ratios be consistent with those that were established for 2020 and 2021, because we won't have a reassessment that's shifting that tax burden. And just to remind the committee, you may recall that we were supposed to have a planned reassessment, a provincial reassessment for the 2021 tax year, for 2021 to 2024. And the province initially postponed that by 1 year during the pandemic. And then subsequently came out, I believe it was part of the 2021 fiscal review, and confirmed that they were not going to do a reassessment for either the 2022 or the 2023 taxation years. So they'll continue to be the same assessment levels as 2021 tax year, which is actually based on a January 1, 2016 current value. So those assessments will stay the same unless there's been a change to a property, and then obviously that property would be reassessed. But other than that, the tax burdens will remain the same across each of the property classes. And so for that means we recommended that the tax ratios just stay consistent as well for 2020, the same as they were for 2020 and 2021, and they'll continue to comply with council's current direction and policy, which is outlined in the report. The other piece of the report is the capping parameters. Each year, the committee and council need to approve the capping parameters and the funding method for the tax capping program, which applies to the commercial, industrial, and the multi-residential properties. So just as a reminder, this was the program that was originally put in place years ago to limit tax increases that resulted from reassessments. And so consistent with prior years, the recommendations that we're making for the 2022 capping program are to continue using whatever options we have available for the remaining properties to exit the capping program as quickly as possible. And that's been a direction of council for a number of years, to use whatever options that we've got to move these properties out of the capping as quickly as we can. And just to note, in 2020 and 2021, the industrial and commercial classes actually exited the capping program respectively. So we actually only have some properties in the multi-residential class remaining now in the capping program. So happy to take any questions. I've also have Mr. Walker here with us tonight in case we've got any technical tax questions that we need him to answer.
Great, thank you very much. Does the committee have any more further questions or comments? Seeing none, may I ask if anybody from the public has come in?
Mr. Chair, we have no public members.
Great, instead of me asking that in the future, I'll just ask you if it's changed to let me know. Thank you. Great, in that case, may I have I guess I have to read this, don't I? That the Administrative Policies Committee recommend as follows, that council approve 2022 tax ratios as follows. A, the residential property class be set at 1.00. B, the new multi-res property class be set at 1.00. C, the multi-res property class be set at 1.70. D, the commercial property class be set at 1.98. Administrative Policies Committee meeting, that E, the industrial policy property class be set at 2.63. F, the pipeline property class be set at 1.1728. G, the farm property class be set at 0.20, and H, the managed forest property class be set at 0.25. that a bylaw attached as Exhibit A to report number AP-22008 be presented to council in order to establish the 2022 tax ratios. That the 2022 property tax capping program utilize all the options available that will move remaining properties as quickly as possible to their current value assessment tax, and that the funding for capped properties be provided from within the respective tax class. D, that a bylaw and report establishing the capping portion used decreased percentage and actual capping results will be presented for council approval after the final property tax bills are calculated and presented. May I have a mover? Councillor Chappell, Councillor Doherty, all in favor? Councillor Holland, you voted no, I assume, for that? Okay, sorry, passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Any motions? None. Any notices of motions? None. Any other business? None. Correspondence? None. Date of next meeting will be April 14th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Thank you very much. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Osterhoff, all in favor? We are adjourned. Have a good evening, all.